Lorene Rickard squinted across her manicured yard, her phone raised like a royal scepter. "I'm calling ICE," she snapped. Rio didn't flinch. The sun glinted off his sunglasses as he glanced up from the driveway. "Funny," he said, voice even. "So am I." Silence spread like a dropped curtain. Even the cicadas seemed to pause. That wasn't how I'd planned to start the week. 2 days prior, I had signed the final contractor form with a shaky hand. My wife, Della, had passed away 10 months ago, and I'd been slow to touch anything she loved, especially the house. But the wood around the porch had begun to soften, the bricks flaked like old paint, and Della would have hated the mess. So I hired a local crew. Quiet, respectful, skilled. Rio Solano led them with the calm precision of someone who didn't need to prove anything. And then came Lorene. She showed up that Monday morning in her signature pink visor, HOA manual clutched like scripture. My driveway sat cracked and half-excavated wheelbarrows leaning like drunks. Rio's guys worked efficiently speaking Spanish. It was 98 degrees and not a speck of shade touched the pavement. I stood by the mailbox, arms crossed, the sweat darkening my shirt in slow Rorschach patterns. I wanted to stay out of it. This wasn't the first time Lorene had concerns. She marched straight up to Rio. "This is a private property community," she said. "English is the operating language here. HOA, Rule 6.2.3. Clear as day." Rio offered a polite nod. "Good morning, ma'am. I'll be filing a formal complaint." He nodded again, offering nothing more. That's when I noticed it across the street. Edna Jo's porch light blinked off. She'd been watching through her curtains again. And just beside her potted cactus, a newly installed Ring camera blinked silently. It was angled directly at my house. Lorene turned to me. "Rhett, we have standards in this community." Della knew that. Mentioning Della was a low blow. "I hired licensed contractors," I said. "You can file whatever you want." She frowned. "Their language, Rhett, it makes people uncomfortable. Maybe that's not their problem." She stepped back, eyeing Rio's crew like a drill sergeant at inspection. Then, as if granting divine judgment, she lifted her phone. "I'm calling ICE." That's when Rio gave her the line that stopped time, and he meant it. I could see it in his posture, relaxed but alert, a man unbothered by the spotlight. Lorene's lips parted, then closed. She lowered her phone half an inch. Something about Rio's tone, or the hint of steel in his calm, gave her pause. Then she turned and walked away without another word. I looked at Rio. What was that? He shrugged, then disappeared into the house, probably in search of water. As he moved, his shirt lifted slightly, and that's when I saw it. Something metallic on his belt, tucked just beneath the hem, half hidden but unmistakable. A badge. Silver. Government issued. The next morning, I found a neatly folded violation notice wedged beneath the welcome mat. Labor must be documented. It read in all caps, red stamp bleeding through the thin HOA letterhead. I hadn't even had coffee yet. Inside, the crew was already unloading planks from Rio's truck. My garage now turned into a makeshift workshop, buzzed with the low whir of an orbital sander. The porch railing smelled faintly of cedar and lemon oil like Della used to rub into her drawers. I flipped the letter over. It was signed by Lorene Rickard's HOA chair. Handwritten underneath in smaller print, C, Regulation 6.2.3, loitering and non-compliance on private sidewalks. Rio whistled low when I showed it to him. "Guess we're famous," he said, tapping the edge of the letter with a dusty finger. "She's escalating," I muttered. "She's bored." I didn't laugh. Something in her tone yesterday when she invoked Della's name stuck in my chest like a splinter. That afternoon, the first email arrived. Subject, Property Values and National Security, from Lorene Rickards. To all HOA board members, CC Community Watch volunteers. Beautification Subcommittee. We have a responsibility to maintain not only aesthetics, but also safety and American values. Loitering workers whose status cannot be verified represent a threat to both. I didn't respond. Instead, I started a folder. Screenshots, emails, photos, timestamps, a spreadsheet with columns for allegation, source, response, and HOA rule referenced. I even color-coded them red for direct attacks, yellow for passive-aggressive notes, blue for procedural manipulations. If she wanted war, I would give her paperwork. Wyatt wandered into the garage, mid-morning skateboard tucked under one arm. He glanced at the wood, the stacked folders, the fluorescent light buzzing above my head. "You building a bomb shelter or something? Just restoring your mother's porch?" I said. She would have just hired someone. I did. He blinked. Right. Before I could say more, he was gone, wheels clattering down the driveway. Later, I noticed the Ring camera across the street Edna Joe's had changed angles. It now pointed directly at our garage. No subtlety, just cold observation, like someone had repositioned it overnight. Rio stood nearby holding a paintbrush dripping ivory white. "You think it's recording audio, probably." He raised an eyebrow. "Should I say something patriotic? Not unless you want to end up in another HOA memo." He smirked, then said something in Spanish I didn't catch. I didn't ask him to translate. At noon, as the sun bleached the lawn into scorched stripes, Lorene arrived again, this time with a clipboard. She didn't step onto my property, but lingered at the sidewalk like a street inspector. "Smells like foreign spices again," she called out, sniffing theatrically. Rio didn't respond. Neither did I. She wrote something down. When she finally walked away, her visor bobbing, I stepped inside and retrieved a 3-ring binder from the kitchen drawer. I labeled it Asset Evidence, April. It felt absurd, all this bureaucratic theater, but also oddly empowering. As dusk crept in, I poured a glass of water, sat on the porch, and watched the shadows stretch long across the concrete. Wyatt hadn't come back. The crew had left. And then I saw it slipped under the door, wedged between the frame and the welcome mat again. A single sheet of paper typed in bold, Comic Sans. "We speak English in Sierra Vista." No signature, just silence. I filed it under Anonymous Communications, tabbed in orange. Bet Sue called it a special session, the kind with plastic folding chairs arranged in tense rows and a clipboard at every seat, no snacks, just suspicion. It was the first time Wyatt asked to come along. "You ever gonna tell me what Rio actually does?" he mumbled as we got out of the truck. "People at school are whispering stuff." I didn't answer. I handed him his tablet instead. "Just record. No commentary." The HOA meeting room smelled like lemon disinfectant and old vinyl. Someone had sprayed the place within an inch of its life. The clock above the exit door ticked with passive aggression. Wyatt and I took a seat near the back. Rio had arrived earlier, already posted against the wall arms, folded like he was waiting for a delayed flight. He wore the same dark shirt sleeves rolled neatly. The crew sat beside him, Aurelio lean and quiet. Mateo slightly younger, with restless hands. They said nothing. Lorene stood at the podium like a game show host from an alternate timeline hairset, eyes sharpened, HOA rulebook tabbed with yellow post-its. "We've received anonymous concerns," she began, regarding the presence of unverified labor on HOA properties. She looked directly at me. Then at Rio. "Per Regulation 8.4.1. All service personnel must be listed licensed and insured through HOA-approved vendors, as of June 1st. There is no record of Mr. Solano's crew under any recognized vendor list." She flipped the page. "Additionally, audio obtained from community surveillance." Edna Joe cleared her throat from the back row. "Community surveillance." Lorene didn't respond. Wyatt tapped something under the table recording just as I'd asked. I noticed he'd opened his camera app instead of the recorder. Smart. Rio said nothing. He didn't even blink. Bet Sue looked uncomfortable, shifting in her chair as if the disinfectant was finally reaching her sinuses. Furthermore, Lorene went on. "There have been aromas, foreign spices emanating from work zones, which raise questions about what's being cooked or consumed on property premises." That got a chuckle from someone Aurelio, I think. Or maybe just the air conditioner kicking in. I glanced at Wyatt. He caught my eye, smirked slightly, then refocused his screen. Finally, Aurelio leaned forward. His voice, when it came, was polite but firm. "We all have federal IDs, ma'am," he said. "Not for landscaping. For logistics. for intel. The room went still. Lorene blinked. Intel. Aurelio didn't elaborate. Neither did Rio. I could almost hear the spreadsheet in her head crashing. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Betty Sue whispered something to the man beside her, George the treasurer, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. No one spoke for nearly 20 seconds. That was the genius of Rio. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. I leaned back. Let the silence do its work. Lorene looked at her clipboard, suddenly unsure where she'd left off. The moment had slipped out of her grip like a bar of soap. "Meeting minutes will be circulated," she said finally, and stepped down. Wyatt nudged me. What just happened? They talked themselves into a corner. Rio caught my eye as we all stood to leave. His expression didn't change, but he gave the slightest tilt of his head like he'd just checked off a box on a mental checklist. "You think she'll check our credentials?" he said quietly. "Or just call ICE again?" I didn't answer. Somewhere in the back, Edna Jo was still recording. I could see the red light blinking softly on her phone. By the time we got to the truck, Wyatt was uploading the footage to his school cloud account. He didn't say a word. He didn't knock. Dad just opened the screen door like he owned the place, stepped onto the back patio and dropped a manila folder on the table like it owed him money. "Clause 7 still holds," he said, not bothering to sit. The wind was picking up from the east, hot, dry, and fast. Dust swirled beyond the fence line, and the sky had that copper tint that meant a storm was assembling over the ridge. Wyatt looked up from the laptop. "What's Clause 7? Dad didn't answer right away. He poured himself a black coffee from my thermos like it was standard issue. Then he pulled a lawn chair an inch closer to the table and cracked the folder open with 2 thick fingers. Inside were yellowing pages typed, signed, and notarized. One had a coffee ring. Another had the top corner torn off. "These," he said, tapping the stack, "are the original bylaws from 1989. Founders Edition. Back when the HOA was 2 dirt roads and a mailbox." He pulled one sheet free and slid it toward me. I read it once, then, again slower. The signature at the bottom jumped out first, Gilbert Rickards, Lorene's husband. Deceased 3 years now, but apparently still governing from the grave. Clause 7. No resident may utilize private surveillance to intimidate, harass, or target individuals without due process or filed complaint with the board. I raised an eyebrow. "You think this'll matter?" Dad took a long sip of coffee. "Depends who's watching." Wyatt leaned forward. "Wait. This is from the Rickards guy. That makes Lorene. What violating her own rules?" Dad didn't smile, but something in his jaw softened. "I'm tired," I said quietly. "I didn't move here to fight over cameras and spices, and I didn't teach my grandson to walk away when the fight is fair." His voice was steady but low. "You think I wanted to argue with planning commissions or zoning boards back in '78? I did it so you'd have a backyard to complain about." Rio appeared at the gate, holding a tape measure and a half-finished bottle of Gatorade. "Storm's rolling fast," he said. "You want us to wrap, or wait it out?" I gestured for him to go ahead and close up shop. "Take the rest of the day." He nodded, paused, then glanced at the folder. That real ink Dad didn't look up, the kind you can't delete. After Rio left, Wyatt reached across and pulled the papers closer. "We could scan these, tag the clauses, make it searchable." I blinked. "You're volunteering to help." Wyatt shrugged. "I'm not exactly rushing to mow lawns." I handed him the scanner from the office drawer. "Start with Clause 7. For the next hour, we worked in silence, the kind of silence that only 3 generations of Arledges could produce. Dad read aloud while I copied key phrases into a document. Wyatt scanned each page and uploaded them into a shared folder titled HOA Rebuttal. Summer 21. Dust scratched against the window screens. A patio chair tipped over. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked and then gave up. Finally, Dad snapped the folder shut. "We don't need to fight dirty," he said. "Just show up with clean evidence." He stood, adjusted the crease of his pants, and looked at me with something dangerously close to pride. "Email it tonight," he added, "before she dreams up Clause 8. He left without saying goodbye. Later that night, I sat in the dim light of my office, the hum of the ceiling fan blending with the soft clatter of Wyatt's keyboard from the next room. I opened my inbox. To board at sierrahoa.org. CC legal at sierrahoa.org. Subject Clause 7. Formal rebuttal. Attached attachment. 1989 bylaws. founderscan.pdf. I hovered over the send button for a moment, then clicked. The air outside cracked with the first hint of thunder. EC has been notified. Lorraine's voice pierced the mid-August heat like a warning siren. She had parked her white Range Rover diagonally across two spaces in front of Trevino's taco truck, blocking both the driver's exit and the line of customers forming in the lot. Her elbow jutted out the window like a sheriff's star. I arrived 10 seconds too late for subtlety. Wyatt was already there, seated on the curb with his phone pointed at the scene live streaming. "She's been yelling for 2 minutes," he muttered without looking up. "I think she thinks she's deputized." The pavement rippled from the heat. Hollis Trevino, owner and cook of the taco truck, had paused mid-salsa stir, arms folded, apron streaked with pepper grease and pride. Lorraine was still shouting. "Unlicensed mobile vendor. Possibly foreign national. No posted permit in English." She banged a printed HOA bulletin against the windshield. It flopped like a wet fish. "That's a community guideline," I said, stepping toward her window. "Not a city ordinance. And we're in a public strip mall." She leaned out further. "You let illegals serve food to your crew. I saw that truck last week near your place. I made a record." "Congratulations," I said. "You've discovered tacos." Rio stood beside me, quiet. He hadn't said a word during her tirade. Aurelio hovered near the taco window, pretending to read the menu but clearly listening. "Ma'am," Rio said finally, "you're obstructing a legal business and trespassing on private commercial property." Lorraine scoffed. "You people think you can wave your spicy sauces and get sympathy?" I called ice. Rio's hand moved slow and deliberate. He unzipped his work vest, not aggressively, just enough to reveal a gleam of silver under the flap. A leather badge case emerged, hinged open like a passport. The blue seal of the Department of Homeland Security caught the sunlight and bounced it back. "Division of Federal Logistics and Intelligence," Rio said evenly. "Badge 4762013. You've been shouting at a federal agent in the middle of a sanctioned task force lunch break." Silence didn't fall. It collapsed. A teenager gasped behind me. Someone dropped a drink. Hollis blinked once and then turned back to his stove. Lorraine's mouth opened and closed like a screen door with a broken spring. She began. I mean, you're wearing boots, and..." Rio tilted his head. "Boots are regulation, ma'am." "Want to see the manual?" Wyatt spun his phone toward me briefly. 20,000 views, he whispered. "And climbing. Comments are savage." I almost smiled. Lorraine clutched the steering wheel like it might save her. "This is harassment." "You blocked a food truck, shouted at a lawful assembly, and misused emergency services," I said calmly. "That's 3 strikes before the first taco." Aurelio stepped forward, holding out a laminated permit from inside the truck. "Would you like to verify the health inspection score while you're at it? It's a 98. Someone clapped, soft, slow, not sarcastic. Rio turned and walked back to the taco truck badge still visible. Wyatt kept filming. Lorraine's Range Rover didn't move for another full minute. Then, like a malfunctioning Roomba, it reversed abruptly and jerked out of the lot, tires squealing over the painted arrows. Hollis passed Rio a fresh plate of tacos. "Free for you and your crew today," she said. "You just made me TikTok famous." I watched as Wyatt uploaded the footage, tagged it HOA Karen versus DHS lunch break. The view count passed 30,000 before we even finished eating. Rio sat on the curb beside me, pulled off his work gloves, and stretched his legs. "Think she'll call ICE again?" he asked, not really needing an answer. "She just tried to arrest ICE," Wyatt said. "I think she's done for the day." I leaned back against the concrete planter, letting the sun bake through my shirt. Sometimes justice doesn't need a gavel or a gun. Just the right badge revealed at the right time under a sky too hot to lie. I never raised my voice. That was the key. The folding chairs had been set up in neat rows. A table of lukewarm lemonade and lemon cookies stood untouched in the back. The HOA quarterly meeting wasn't usually well attended until today. Wyatt counted over 40 people, not including the two from the Sierra Vista Post taking notes in the back. Someone had slipped a flyer under everyone's door. Discussion of community conduct. Attendance encouraged. Laureen entered late, wearing a red blazer too heavy for September face already shiny with sweat. She didn't sit. Bet Sue, chairing the meeting, tapped the microphone. Let's get started. First on the agenda, community safety footage submitted by Mr. Arledge. Rhett, the floor is yours. I rose slowly and wheeled out the cart. Atop it sat a modest flat screen and a small speaker, both borrowed from Wyatt's school. I clicked play. The clip began with Laureen's voice. Whose truck is this? Are you even legal? This sidewalk is American. The timestamp blinked August 2nd, 2022, 2:14 p.m. The camera angle was steady, just high enough from the porch ring cam to catch her standing at the edge of my driveway, 1 foot inside the property line. She waved a clipboard, muttered something about real Americans, then glanced around before pulling a phone from her purse. This is a threat, she hissed into it. This neighborhood's slipping. The sound of sprinklers kicked on. A moment later, she pivoted back toward the house and shouted something indecipherable, her voice rising in a pitch that sent the room into stunned silence. Then, clear as daylight, she added, Real Americans report threats when they see them. I don't care if he's a vet or not. Pause. Static. Clip ended. No one moved. Wyatt closed the laptop softly. The video had looped once already. Laureen broke the silence with a bark. You ambushed me. You edited that? That's taken out of context. Bet. Sue stood slowly. Laureen, she said, voice tight. Did you say those things? Laureen's jaw moved, but no sound came. Did you trespass? Bet. Sue pressed. She had a clipboard, I offered gently, but no permit. Section 4.1.3 requires written notice before property inspections. Not an inspection, Laureen snapped. Then, what was it? Orville's voice sliced through the room like a paper cut. He had been sitting in the last row, arms crossed quiet until now. No one had seen him enter. You filmed yourself, he said. All we did was rewind. I make this motion, Bet Sue announced, removing her reading glasses, to suspend President Rickards from HOA leadership, effective immediately, pending formal review by the Ethics Committee. Hands went up around the room, half the board. Then more, a pause, unanimous. Someone coughed. Another sipped their lemonade. The meeting, for all its weight, continued. Laureen stumbled back toward the hallway, eyes scanning for support that never arrived. Outside, the September sun dipped lower across the sidewalk, the same one she once policed with righteous fury. Wyatt nudged me, phone still recording. She didn't even deny it. Truth doesn't need a rebuttal, I said. It just needs a timestamp. He smirked. You sound like Rio. Speaking of, Rio had skipped the meeting. Too official now, too much attention. But his presence lingered like that badge, like that silence he wore so well. Before leaving, I unplugged the speaker and slipped the USB into my pocket. Keep it, Wyatt asked. No, I said. File it. Back at home, I labeled the footage folder Exhibit A, HOA, hearing, verified. Sometimes justice is quiet, just a looped clip and a room full of chairs. The wind had picked up by the time I stepped onto the porch. Dry leaves skittered across the cement like they were in a hurry to get away. Wyatt was crouched beside the mailbox, tightening the last screw on the new latch. He didn't look up. You tightened that like a soldier, I said. He smirked. YouTube. Across the street, Laureen's Range Rover hadn't moved all morning. A white notice flapped on her front door, held in place by blue painter's tape. From here, I could just make out the bold header, pending federal review, under Civil Code 412. Word had spread fast after the Department of Justice sent the HOA board an inquiry. Edna Jo told me in her usual whispery way that this wasn't the first time a president got too bold with bylaws. Apparently, back in '03, one was removed for forging parking violations. Laureen hadn't made a public statement, Just got herself a lawyer and stopped waving from her porch. Rio dropped by briefly, leaving a manila envelope on my kitchen counter. "Official update," he said. "You're no longer under local HOA investigation." Then he tipped an invisible hat and left before I could offer coffee. I didn't open the envelope. I knew what it meant. That part was over. Out front, Orville stood beside the mailbox, now holding a clipboard. His eyes scanned the horizon like he was tracking a storm only he could see. He handed it to me without a word. The title read, "Petition to Establish Sierra Vista Veterans Relief Fund." Below it, 20 blank lines. He'd already signed the first. I thought maybe he said you'd take the second. Wyatt looked up from the mailbox. "What's it for support for local vets? Legal advice workshops, maybe job placement?" I signed, then passed the pen to Wyatt. He didn't hesitate. The apology check was typed on HOA letterhead signed by 3 board members and folded crisply in a navy envelope. I left it on the kitchen counter, never cashed it. Instead, I sent back a list of requests, 1 folding table, a vinyl banner, and 2 hours at the Sierra Vista Spring Fair. "Payment accepted in dignity," I wrote in the email. It was March again. The fair smelled of kettle corn sunscreen and early lemon blossoms. Our table stood under a modest canopy between the pet adoption booth and the library's used book sale. A handmade banner read, "Community Integrity Fund for Veterans, for Workers, for Neighbors." Wyatt co-signed the opening paperwork. His name looked neater than mine. We'd set out brochures, old photos, a clipboard for donations. One image caught people's attention: my wife 10 years ago handing out lemonade at this very fair. Wyatt found it in an old scrapbook. She wore a sun hat too big for her face and a grin too wide to fake. Rio stopped by just after noon, nodded once and dropped a plain envelope into the donation box. "No name," he said. "Just trust." "Always," I replied. A small boy wandered over, tugged at my sleeve. "Are you really ice?" he asked. I knelt beside him. "That and drywall," I said. He squinted. "Is that like a superhero? More like cleanup crew?" People came and went. Some smiled, some nodded politely. Bet Sue lingered longer than most, her arms crossed like she was still unsure if this counted as politics or progress. I offered her a brochure. She took 2. Edna Joe never stopped by, but someone left a note folded beneath the donation jar. Sometimes silence is resistance. Sometimes it's support. By sundown, the clipboard was full. Wyatt had talked nonstop for an hour straight. Orville just watched from the bench, sipping lemonade like it was a strategy session. As we packed up, I heard someone behind me mutter, "Funny." That's how it started. I smiled, shook hands with a man I didn't know, and said, "No, son." That's how it changed.